You are now listening to Out of the Blank.
Well, welcome to another episode of Out of the Blank podcast. I'm here with Corey Stevenson.
Thanks, Rob.
I,
I like
I,
that.
I always like the like the punch or do whatever, to throw out there. I like getting everybody hyped up and people, you get surprised when someone says your name in a fun way.
I know. I was surprised just now. I was like, yes, this is awesome. I'm ready.
I spent my whole life people being like, Robbie Robertson? They're like, do your parents hate you? I was like, yes.
I had a lot of people wondering if you were the same Robbie Robertson, I guess is a famous musician
Please
by the
don't.
same name.
Oh,
I
God.
didn't know. I have no clue who that musician is. And I'm sure I have a friend whose name is Luke. So, and he hates Luke, I Am Your Father. And I'm sure you hate that comparison as well, as I just kicked off the interview with that one.
Owns my Twitter, dude. I can't
uh,
have a Twitter handle because of that guy. He tweets like crazy, and people are like, "He just made a new album." I'm like, "Oh, that's wonderful."
You're like, where's my percentage?
Exactly. I want to get a cut of that cake. But Corey, tell me a little bit about yourself, and if you want, what you do professionally.
Yes, sir. I'm originally from Maryland, and you and I just discovered that offline real quick, and I'm sure we'll circle back to that. But I went to school for film at Towson University out there outside of Baltimore, and I moved to LA. I guess at this point about 14 years ago, and I was in LA for about 13 years, and I just moved to Oregon with my wife. And so what I do full time is podcasting. I run 3 separate podcasts and kind of like I don't run the network, but I'm a part of the network and everything. And the podcasts that I do are Podcasting After Dark, which is kind of like this retro themed podcast where we talk about old cult movies from like the 80s and the 70s and early 90s, stuff that basically we grew up. Me and my friend grew up like watching on like Cinemax and stuff like at midnight. Like those old sleazy movies that have a lot of sex and violence and are just like exploitation films and just cult
Time
classics.
favorite cult movie is The Big Lebowski. I have my
Oh, that's a good
ordained
one.
minister's license under the Church of the Latter Saint Dude, is what they call it.
That's awesome. I love that movie, man. That's a great movie.
It's a classic, dude. I
It's a
mean,
classic.
like, it's the whole reason I got addicted to bowling for so long. I was just going there. I was like, I wish back in the day you could smoke a cigarette in here, and you had he said nobody messes with the Jesus, and it's that dude that started licking the bowling ball, dude. That was priceless, man. That was a great
Oh,
ass movie.
dude, it is a great movie, man. I love that movie. We tend to lean a little bit towards maybe horror and sci-fi and action movies like Commando and Invasion USA and stuff like that. And then like horror movies like well, we're gonna get to Reanimator eventually, but we Return the Living Dead 1, 2, and 3. We did all those, and then we interview some people too. We've interviewed like the director of Return the Living Dead 3, Brian Usna. He was also a producer on Reanimator. We just released our interview with Jeanette Goldstein, who you probably know as Vasquez from Aliens, and she
Oh
talks
shit.
about her like how she got cast as that, and she was the stepmom in Terminator 2 that kills Wolfie's just fine, but she has the blade going into her husband's mouth. That was her as well. She was a great interview, but it's a lot of fun. Me and my buddy have a good time with it, and then I have a weekly Seinfeld podcast where me and my friend just
Don't
break down
don't.
Seinfeld.
I hate Seinfeld. That's the one show I can't stand. My mom loves it, but I can't stand Jerry Seinfeld. So you're not watching Seinfeld. It's his voice, man. It's the whole reason I would love comedians in cars getting coffee or whatever, but Jerry Seinfeld's in it, so I refuse to watch any episodes. Like my buddy's like, dude, it's basically like your podcast. It's him conversating with people. And I'm like, yeah, but it's Jerry Seinfeld. He's like, you can't look past it. I'm like, I can't do the oh, what's the deal? I can't do
What's
that.
the deal?
It kills me, man.
Hey, Rob, what's the deal with your podcast? Dude, and by the way, I can't like feel you on that one, but I get it because my wife hates Seinfeld, and I do believe that she's kind of leaned into her hatred a little bit more just because I have a full-time Seinfeld podcast about it, so it's kind of given her a reason to sort of like lean into it for fun, you know what I mean? Just
Yeah.
for fun. But I mentioned her hatred for it a lot on the podcast.
I think it's
And
just because like I just for some reason I like Adam Sandler, which you would think if you're thinking about people that are nasally, you wouldn't really like Adam Sandler either. But I just don't know about Jerry Seinfeld. I mean, he seems like a cool guy, but every time he starts talking, I want to take a cheese grater to my head.
I might feel the same way if I didn't like grow up with it, you know. Like for me, it's a hardcore nostalgic thing. I am just to let you know your listeners know and everything, just to put me in the age bracket. I am 42. I was born in 1978, and I think it's only applicable because a lot of the stuff that I talk about are quote unquote the nostalgic stuff. So for different, that's different for you than it is for me. It's whatever you sort of grew up with. And so my bracket nostalgia is kind of like 80s and then like early 90s and stuff like that.
That's what
And
you
then I,
bonded to. Like I get that because there I had a woman on my podcast before. She was a writer, but she did a podcast with her friend that was in a different state, and they would connect. And what they would do is there's an age gap, about 20-year difference. It's called How I Met Your Friends podcast, and it
hmm,
was supposed to be How I Met Your Mother, and then the TV show Friends, and it was the era that they grew up in. The younger one grew up obviously with the show How I Met Your Mother, becoming their kind of, I guess, whatever TV show to watch as a kid, and then she grew up on Friends, Pivot, all that type of stuff. Like me, I got a mixture of the both. She was in my age still. Like How I Met Your Mother was a bigger show to me than Friends was. I only watched Friends because Jennifer fucking Aniston's in it, and that's just, I mean, yeah, you don't even need to explain that one.
Oh, I get that. Trust me. And as a Seinfeld fan, I don't hate Friends. I know there's kind of like this meme war on Facebook back and forth between Friends groups and Seinfeld groups and stuff. But honestly, I like Friends too, man. I grew up watching Friends. I love Friends. And that's like my wife's favorite show. So we do actually watch a lot of Friends in this household. But I watch a lot of
Well,
Seinfeld.
it's weird because all those actors and stuff, like they got, I guess it was right in the beginning, but they slipped in on like a really hit kind of TV show that ran for so many seasons. Like one of my all-time favorite shows, and I don't even care if people make fun of me for it, Supernatural.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
that's for 14 seasons now, and each season is like 20 something episodes running 45 minutes a piece, and they've been doing it from the start, and that's how they've gotten stardom basically. Like they just hooked into the show and locked into it, and it's still one of the longest series really going right now that's not animated.
Yeah, yeah, no, I know. I've wanted to get into Supernatural, and my friends keep telling me that I guess the first couple of seasons had fantastic soundtracks, and if you have the DVD box sets, those soundtracks are like still intact. But I think for streaming, they like lost some of the rights to like I think they had like Back in Black from AC/DC on there and stuff like that.
The
So
opening song was "Carry On My Wayward Son." Like that was
yeah,
the whole thing that even got me hooked into it. Like I was like,
oh, it's
"Holy
such a
shit!"
great
Like
song.
it just pumps you up. I didn't
Yeah.
even know who Kansas was, but then once I heard like that on Supernatural, I was like, "What is this song?" And I started learning all about this stuff. That's where you can find where your music comes from.
Yeah, and I always found it interesting. I think Married with Children is streaming on Crackle, and they had to change the opening song because that was a Frank Sinatra song originally. And man, I mean, like I tried watching that with the new song. I mean, it ruins the entire experience. And you're like, oh, how can like 30 seconds at the beginning ruin a 22 episode minute show? And it does, man. It's insane because it's so bad. But I hate it when TV shows lose the rights to the music that they use.
Not even like the time or age that you watch one of these hit shows, but really what time they come on. For me, Married with Children, which would have been probably for you, probably would have came on maybe a little bit in the late afternoon or something. For me, it came on at 2 o'clock in the morning, where I was like too lazy to find the damn remote to switch it, and I was a little kid, so I was just sitting there watching and go love and marriage
Yep.
like over and over again. It's just like what like it was one of those Adult Swim type things. I mean, one of my all-time favorite cartoons didn't come on until 1 o'clock in the morning, and it was like I'd always watch it. Man, like I would always be like sick from school, so I didn't have to worry about getting sleep. So I would just be like faking sick, and I'd be watching Invader Zim. That was the
Yeah.
show that came on at like 1 o'clock in the morning. Like you had to stay up for that shit.
Hey man, I'll blow your mind. I can still remember when Fox didn't exist, and then all of a sudden we like one of the channels on our TV now is Fox. Like, and Married with Children was on there, The Simpsons, like all that kind of stuff. I mean, it was a great time, and there was some great content being produced back then. I mean, it still is, but like, man, those shows just really hold up well. And dude, Invader Zim was awesome. I watched that in college and everything. I loved that show, especially when I was smoking with my
Yeah,
friends and
they
everything.
they brought it back too, and honestly, it was just to explain a lot of the stuff that they left out on, but it didn't really have the same vibe to it. I guess I only really liked it because I enjoyed it so much as a kid. But like, would you say that movies and television shows are better now or better back in the day? Because I think they're way better back in the day.
I mean, the thing is, like especially when movies like horror movies, right? And like there's better special effects now. But then the question is, just because you can use the CGI, does it mean should you? And I do think that we went through a weird phase where everyone relied too heavily on CGI, and now it's kind of balancing out where they see that okay, I'm going to use prosthetics and stuff, and then I'm just going to make, I'm going to fill the seams in, I'm going to fix some of the wonky stuff with CGI, and it's kind of this perfect amalgamation of everything. You look at the Mandalorian now compared to like say the prequel movies where it's the same technique. They're on a stage that doesn't really have much, and they're using a lot of blue screen and stuff like that. But man, the Mandalorian looks so much better than the prequels because everything's coming along. But there's just some really fun quaintness about like older horror movies like from the 70s and the 80s. They just there was like this, they didn't care so much about certain things that like we care about now. A lot of times the audience really picks things apart and looks at things like with a fine tooth comb, digs into things. But back then, you didn't have the internet to look at stuff like to pour over and look at every single aspect of something. I mean, when I was growing up, dude, I would draw the hell out of Boba Fett. I mean, I'm a huge Boba Fett fan from Star Wars.
Big
And
Django fan, man.
dude, I love Jango Fett too, man. Don't get me wrong. I love all the Fets, but
Yeah,
I'm
you got
even
his
wearing a Boba Fett hat right now, and I got
fucking
a
head
Boba Fett shirt
chopped
on.
off by Mace Windu.
I
You
know.
have to let it pass because it's Samuel Jackson.
But that fight, dude, in the rain with Django versus Obi-Wan is still like one of my favorite moments in all of Star Wars. But
That's
dude, when
funny
I was
because tonight is a night that I was just on a Star Wars podcast my buddy owns, and he calls me Robbie One Kenobi, so that's pretty hilarious.
nice, but like, oh shoot, I lost my
The
train
fight
of.
scene with Obi-Wan and Jango
Yeah,
Fett.
that was oh no, what I was gonna say is so when I was younger, you want to draw Boba Fett or something, right? Like I'm an artist, so I'd like, oh cool, I want to draw Boba Fett. I only had like at my disposal a couple magazines with a handful of shots in them. There was no internet. I mean, now you can go to like the official 501st and you can do like full on scans of these costumes and zoom in and look exactly what they were. So I think the difference between now and then is that when people made a movie back then, like they would be like, okay, we don't, we're making a cheesy horror movie or something. We didn't really care if something maybe didn't quite make sense because there wasn't this culture of really analyzing every single minutia about it. And I think that afforded filmmakers to kind of be a little bit more loosey goosey with some of their concepts and some of their movies. But at the end of the day, man, movies look great nowadays. Like I
But
mean, I
that's
can't.
that's the
I
problem with movies nowadays. Is the big giant problem is there's they can either focus so much on the graphics and all the camera angles and stuff. Like I just saw someone just put on Curb Your Enthusiasm for me to watch the other day for the first time. I'm watching the beginning of it. I'm like, when the fuck was this made? Like, cause it had that vintage look in it. I like that when it comes to a movie, like The Big Lebowski. When I'm watching it, I can smell the cigarettes. I can
yeah.
literally like just by viewing it, you see the tumbleweed going and stuff. There was a good story to it. It didn't need to rely a whole bunch on flashy CGI or explosions or something. Now it's the problem with horror movies nowadays is like it's all focused on CGI explosions, a whole bunch of money going into the budget, and the story kind of lacks. You're
Yeah.
like, where's the stuff that's supposed to get me hooked in? I mean, Bird Box, for instance, I thought that was a train wreck. The first 5 minutes was amazing because people were killing themselves all over the place, which was awesome. And then the other time it's just like, do we hide? Do we open up our eyes? Do we see it? It's all that anticipation crap. I'm like, this is like The Happening. That
Yeah.
was a very good movie, The Happening.
It's
It got a
in
lot
it.
of crap.
I know. I have thoughts on that happening, but I'm with you, man. Bird Box was lame, and but for every 20 Bird Boxes, there are one Hereditary, which Hereditary was absolutely terrifying. But also, I think because the director relied on a lot of like old school techniques, and I think that's sometimes where it comes into play. Is if the director wants to kind of like give it this flash and everything, then they'll use the CGI sheen, but some directors are really in tune with like that old school look and everything, and sometimes they'll go even so far as to like use older film stock, because when you're watching like Rise of Skywalker now, it looks different than like say A New Hope, because like literally they use a different film stock. I believe that Rise of Skywalker is probably all digital, so like right then and there it's like 70s and 80s film stock just had this like sort of tactile feel to them, and I think a lot of times we kind of hone in on that, and we try to like make these like filters that look like it, but really it's you can't do anything to change the fact that like it's this tactile thing. Like film is a real thing that you can hold in your hand. Like the image was created right there, whereas digital, it's all ones and zeros, and it can be whatever you want, but you can't, sometimes you just can't take away from that tactile feel that film has.
We did glam it up a little bit too, but I also think where the problem is, where we're seeing a lot of films now, is the censorship thing. I think that's why Quentin Tarantino's movies are so damn good, is because he doesn't give a fuck. Like
Yeah.
he puts it in a way or twists it in a way that makes you like, holy shit, did he just really say the N word like 50 times in the first 5 minutes? Like
Yeah.
when they push the barrier like that, it's different and people react to it like, holy crap, but it's so good. It's so intense. The Hateful Eight's a good movie. All these giant things where it's like they don't give a shit. They push the boundary. That was like that back in the day. I mean, I don't know how many times I was watching SpongeBob with my dad and I was laughing, and then they would say a joke on there that I wouldn't get. And then I look back on it now and I get it. I'm like, there were jokes for adults in there, so
Yeah.
the adults could sit down. I mean, Flintstones, for instance, that was a great fucking film. That's one of my all-time favorite actors right there. John Goodman.
Oh, I love
Yeah.
John Goodman, dude. Oh my God, he's fantastic
That
all the time.
scene with Larry in the homework was the funniest thing I have ever seen in my entire life. He said, "Is this your homework?" He keeps asking him and asking. He goes, "We know this is your homework." I'm like, "We just spent 5 minutes of you asking him if it was his homework."
Oh, dude, I love John Goodman, man. That guy is a national treasure.
He plays. I mean, like that's what we say when we talk about like iconic films and like first of all, iconic TV shows. Like you look at Seinfeld and stuff. Like Jerry Seinfeld, man, yeah, he was a comedian, but he got his giant fame from that show.
Yeah.
Kevin James was a movie star, but he got his giant fame, which a lot of people know him from King of Queens.
Yep.
Like
Yep.
it's everyone's like they get this niche role that seems like perfect. Like all the characters from Friends. The only reason they have super huge stardom now, besides Jennifer Aniston, that just went off and did her own movies and stuff too, but you know them from Friends.
Yeah, and it's a great thing because when we were both of us, like when both of us were younger, TV had this stigma as that like you couldn't go to TV and then like go to movies and stuff, because once you were at TV, that was a different level. But then TV started becoming so good with like shows like Sopranos and Breaking Bad, and just TV became, it's like we're living in the new golden age of TV, where a lot of times TV's just as good as the movies. And I'll circle back around to The Mandalorian. And I was like, man, I do not hate the sequel trilogy at all. I'm not gonna say I hate them, but like that Mandalorian TV show, especially the finale, is everything Rise of Skywalker wishes it was. It was just amazing. And it had, it looked like a movie, because now like they're almost indistinguishable. Like you could put the Mandalorian up on the movie screen, you'd be like, okay, that's a movie, but no, it was made for TV, because the budget of all this special effects are going down and everything. But now because of that, you see all these great actors are doing TV shows, and they're also doing movies at the same time. It doesn't matter. I think it's a great time to be an actor. I think you have so much more content options out there. All these channels like Amazon Prime's got new shows coming out, all the time. Hulu's got new shows coming out. Netflix, everybody's got shows coming out. Everyone's got good content. Like, dude, like it's insane how much good content that's out there. I mean, granted, there's a ton of crap content too, but there is so much good content, man. When I was younger, you would be starved for like a good sci-fi show to actually be on TV. The best you'd have would be something like, I don't know, Stargate, which was crap, or Xena. I know people love Xena. It wasn't my thing. Hercules still wasn't really my thing. But there just wasn't. But now you're like, holy crap, there's like 20 amazing sci-fi shows over all the different streaming networks, and you're like, well, which one do I watch? Because I don't have enough time in the day now, you know. But I will say this: the one thing that kind of like the side effect of becoming a full-time content producer is that I have very little time to actually consume content anymore. So I am missing just so much stuff. I've never seen Breaking Bad because I instead watch a lot of 80s, crappy 80s horror movies because that's what my job tells me to do. Granted, I'm not complaining because that's not a hard job to have, but
At one point, I think just watching TV just turned on for me to be a background noise. Like I remember
mhm.
so many times as a little kid watching, like waiting for the show to come up next Sunday or Dragon Ball Z coming up on like a Tuesday morning or something. You would get up, I'd be shirtless as a little kid sitting on like a high chair eating a freaking egg sandwich or something and just like sitting in my diapers. My dad, like, this fucking guy, like, holy, he's got his life figured out. Look at him. And that's where I wanted to ask you with the Maryland thing too.
Yeah.
Okay, so I recently I got kind of shouted out as like having a southern accent. And I was like, really? And I was like, from the South. He's like, yeah, are you from the South? I'm like, I'm from Maryland. But I started to notice when we say Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Old Bay, and like we have that
Yeah.
southern drawl to it. But do you put ketchup on your eggs?
Um, I put Old Bay on my eggs.
That's good. Okay.
I'll put Old Bay on anything, baby. I've taught my wife. I've taught, and my wife's Latina. She's half Mexican, half Guatemalan, with a little Salvadorian in there. And I taught her the ways of the Old Bay, and she's been teaching me the ways of spices and stuff.
Every Marylander has Old Bay on their
Got
tool
to,
belt. But
got to,
ketchup on the
baby.
eggs, like my dad's from Baltimore. I'm from Ocean City. So his whole side of the family, like that's all ketchup on the eggs, and to me, that's just straight disgusting. They also like Royal King syrup, which is like
Oh,
straight up cough medicine, and nobody tells you
yeah.
that. Like you just think it's like Miss Buttersworth. I go to my grandparents' house, get a nice thing of flapjacks, dump it all over my flapjacks. I go and take a bite. I'm like, this is fucking terrible. She's like, it's not Miss Buttersworth. This is rich man syrup. I'm like, rich man syrup sucks ass.
That's usually how it happens. But it's funny that you bring up Southern because I know we're south of the Mason Dixon line, but I have never like really been like, oh, we're Southerners. You know what I mean? Like I don't know, man. I never really like associated with that. And I have my family in Virginia. I was actually born in Virginia, and I would spend my summers growing up with my dad in Roanoke, and I still have like family down there. And then I would like go to school and everything during the school year with my mom up in Albany, Maryland. So I kind of actually grew up a little bit closer to DC, like Silver Spring area. And then when I went to college at Towson, I would do like my partying in like Fells Point and, stuff like that. But I would also spend most of my summers, at least 1 or 2 weeks, would be at Ocean City. So I have very, very fond memories of Ocean City as well. And like, I mean, to this day, like if I picture like the quintessential like boardwalk in my head, it's Ocean City, man. Like
Yeah.
that's so many of my childhood like memories are from there. Although I only have a few like, older than 21 memories because I was already gone, so I didn't get to kind of enjoy Ocean City as an adult, unfortunately. And I always like in the back of my head, I always want to go back anytime I visit Maryland. But you go and visit for a week, and your time is just so packed, right? Like all your friends, family, yada yada. And I just like, oh crap, I didn't get to go to Ocean City. But like, I always want to go back, dude. I always want to go back. How is it these days, by the
It's I
way?
mean, it's not it's just a lot of tourist stuff, dude. But like, see, I've been born and raised here, so I'm at the point where like I don't want to be here anymore. Like the whole
Yeah.
reason I'm even from here is because my dad made a kind of like a pact with his buddy before they graduated high school. They were both going to move down here, and they're coming from Baltimore, so they were going to move down here and start up a place and live by the beach and do all these things, become like rock stars and stuff. And right, like I think a month before my dad graduated, his buddy was actually killed going down a hill. He was walking, it was kind of foggy out, and the teacher ran him over because you couldn't see
Oh,
over the hill. And when he went over, he ran the kid over. And then the worst thing the teacher did was he hit the brakes. And when he hit the brakes is where the kid's head was, and it crushed
oh.
his head. So it was like a big thing. And my dad's like, I got to move down here. I got to do what we said we're going to do. And I'm going to do this myself. And he ended up like joining a radio station, becoming a broadcaster, owns his own radio station now.
Oh
And
wow.
he played, I mean, I knew my dad as he was the drummer for Kiss, basically. He was in a Kiss tribute band, played all Rams Head Live in Baltimore, played in front of like 50,000 people, was in a commercial with Kiss. And it was like, that's how I always knew my dad, like to just to see that and that kind of change though. But I think it's when you're from somewhere completely different, like me being born and raised here, I want to fucking move. I want to go
Hmm.
somewhere out in the countryside. I want to be completely in a different atmosphere. But I know I'll always kind of miss that bay smell. Like
Yeah.
me and you know what it means to have a crab feast.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody else knows what it means to have a crab feast. I listened to Ryan Sickler's podcast. He's from Baltimore, Maryland, but he's got one called the Honeydew. But there's used to be one called the Crab Feast. People are like, what does that mean? What's a crab feast? And he's like, not too many people know what that means to have the whole
Yeah.
bay out on the table and be sitting confined to a
Drinking
spot.
beers, drinking Yinglings all day long, and it takes hours, and you're never quite full at the end of it, but you're having a good time, and your fingers, your cuticles hurt because of all the vinegar and the
Got
oils
cuts
and
and shit
everything.
in it
Yeah,
all over,
yeah, all over
freaking
it.
hurting the next day, but you love
Uh-huh.
the crab, so you keep on doing it.
Exactly. I'm actually my wife has never done one. She's dying to, so we're actually heading home in August for my mother's birthday, and the whole goal is to have a big crab feast, have the family come in, and so my wife can actually experience it, but she's like dying for it. She's like I'm so excited for this fabled crab feast, and I'm like it's great. I mean, we're just going to sit around talking and drinking and eating crabs for
And
like
that
hours.
you know what that correlates to though, like to kind of like bring it back a little bit is the fact is that is a bonding experience.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, like, for me, Dragon Ball Z, the reason why it sticks out so much in my head is because it was a bonding experience with my older brother. It was
Yeah.
something we would get up and we would watch and we would sit there and we would talk about it afterwards. We'd act like it in like the backyard or something. And he was older than me, so of course I always lost, like, that whole thing. But I think why movies and films are really kind of there because they stick out in like a certain part of your memory or something. Like what would be one memorable film for you, either if it was as a child or as an adult, it hit you a certain period?
Oh, buddy, I got a million. So my dad and I bonded over movies. Looking back, as a kid, I was like, "Oh, this is neat and all," but now I'm older. I can kind of put myself in my dad's shoes, and he was probably just didn't know like what to say to me and like what what I mean. He was like a young dad and everything. So we would go see movies. Here, the problem was he didn't give no shits about no MPAA. So like I saw Aliens, the movie Aliens, in the theater when I was 8 years old, and it's now my favorite movie of all time. I always tell people Star Wars is life for me. Like every aspect of my life is Star Wars, but my like if I had one movie to go to the desert island with, it'd be Aliens. And to kind of answer your question, for me, it's special because it was first off, it was the first movie I was excited for. So like around when you're 8 years old, you don't have a concept that movies are coming out. They just sort of appear and you just sort of know that they exist now. So it was the first movie that I knew was coming out because I saw an article in my grandfather's Time magazine about it, because Aliens was a big deal at the time. That was a big movie. Alien was a big deal. So like making the sequel was a big deal. So it was in Time magazine. So I was like, oh, 8-year-old, 7-year-old Corey looking through this Time magazine sees like this picture of this drop ship, the one that's going through, bringing all the Marines in. I'm like, oh my God, my mind's blown, right? This is amazing. And I'd already seen Return of the Jedi at the time. So I was like, tell my dad, please take me to see this. And it scared the shit out of me. But I loved it, and it created a lifelong obsession. But my dad also took me to see RoboCop in the theater. I think I was 9 years old when I saw a man melt in front of my fucking eyes. And I saw Predator in the theater, which for me, the scariest part of Predator was the skinned body sort of hanging upside down. But yeah, man, my dad took me to see some inappropriate stuff. But now, 42 years later, I have a podcast called Podcasting After Dark, where I talk about the same movie. So
Those
I don't
were
know.
bonding experiences.
Exactly.
Like I went, all right, my dad and my mom both worked a lot. So like my dad was only home probably 3 hours a night. So I spent a lot of my weekends at my grandparents' house with my brother in Delaware. And what we would do is we go to Midway, the movie theater down there. And that's where I learned the best information ever in my entire life. My grandfather's like, stop getting snow caps and get juji fruits. I'm like, juji fruits? That's not even a candy. That's a death sentence. And he's like, just get them and trust me. So I get that. I mean, you would tear open a box of snow caps in a matter of a minute before the previews were even over. Then you
Yeah.
wouldn't have anything for the rest of the movie. I ate Juji fruits, dude. I was eating that thing for like 2 weeks after the movie was over, man. You're
I
picking
know.
suckers out of that teeth, you know. But
Yep.
what's interesting was like my very first films. My parents used to be giant horror fans. Like back in the day, they would always watch them together when I was really little. And I remember watching it was that spider movie, Tarantula or something,
Okay.
with all the like arachnids or whatever. It was the dude that played in Scary Movie, or not Scary Movie, Scream, that
Oh,
played
oh,
the.
oh, oh. Was it Eight-Legged Freaks?
I think so. All I remember is that I'm seeing bits and pieces of this. I still kind of get terrified with spiders now. Is there's a dude sitting in a barber chair and he's like, "I'm not leaving here. You guys are all insane." He pulls up a newspaper and a spider just comes up behind this chair, freaking puts him in a cocoon or whatever. And I'm like, "Yep, I'm good." Like, if you want to talk about like shit that'll scar you for the rest of your life, that's one of them. But like going to the movies, I saw Dark Knight with my dad. I mean, we would go see like Meet the Robinsons, and then you saw the Dark Knight. Like, we're watching the superhero movie. First beginning part of the scene is a bank robbery and like people getting shot. And my dad's just like, "Holy shit!" And I just look over like, "That's $1 in the swear jar." He's like, "Here's $5. This should cover me for the first 10 minutes."
Oh man, that's awesome, dude. That is awesome. And I dig that you have such a strong connection to your grandparents too. Like was being raised by my mom. She was working full time and everything. So like I was kind of like after school and everything raised by my grandpa. So like I have a very like strong connection to them. They've all passed by now, but like I was such a grandpa's boy. Me and him would hang out and everything. So like I had such strong connections to all of them. It's and all of it comes through like movies and entertainment and stuff, and these are the bonds that we make. And I know it, like it's like, oh, it's this meaningless, is it meaningless? It's just entertainment, but it's not meaningless. It has this meaning to it because we shared it, and that's where it comes from.
They're memories that stick in your head because like you want to talk about or bonds. People always think of bonds that are considered with a friendship or maybe a blood relative or something. My grandparents are not my grandparents. Me and my
Mhm.
brother are half brothers, so they're
Okay.
technically his grandparents. So there is that kind of me trying to prove to them that I'm part of the family, mowing the lawn, doing all these things to be helpful. But I never, with my grandparents, it's love there. Like we went to the movies, and I can tell you this is probably my worst movie experience ever. And I'm going to ask you yours too, whether it was at a theater or whether it was just a terrible thing. But listen to this. So I saw I Am Legend in theaters. That is my one of my all time favorite movies. It's kind of what's happening now. That's why if they get a vaccine for coronavirus, I'm not getting it until like 7 months after, because that's how the people turn into zombies in I
Yeah.
Am Legend.
Yeah.
But I remember watching it and just sitting there like, holy shit, like I'm scared. Like I was probably 14 or like 13 when that movie came out. So I'm sitting there like kind of like, holy shit, like people are screaming, zombies are freaking out. I'm just like, whoa, like this is way too much. And I remember we had a 14-year-old Dalmatian and he fell off the back steps. And this is right when we got back from the movie theater. So it's nighttime now, and my grandparents live out in the country, and it is some scary shit. Barely any lights. It's very, very dark. And my grandpa puts on his back little porch light or whatever. And he's like, "Stay with him." And I just watched a scary fucking
Yeah.
movie. So I'm like, my mind's racing off and I'm looking at trees and stuff, thinking there's zombies out there waiting for me. And I'm supposed to keep the dog on the ground so they can pull up the car or something. They felt like they were gone for 45 minutes. I was like, I'm about to leave this fucking dog and I'm about to go inside. But like, that was just something that always stuck out in my head whenever I see like Will Smith or something now. I
Yeah.
just relate it right back to that.
It's interesting that yours has to do with a pet. Mine does too. When I was a kid, I can still remember. I grew up with a cat. So my mom had the cat before she had me, right? So like I grew up with it, and I guess I was probably like 8 or 9, probably around that time when the cat had to be put down, just because it gotten old, or maybe like I was 10 or something. I can't quite remember, but I remember the movie that she like took me and my friend to go see. So like I guess my friend was at the house with us, and I think the cat just kind of like passed out in its litter box, and she knew that things were just this is it for the cat, and she was crying. I kind of didn't know what was happening, and she was like, well, let me just take you to the movies and kind of just drop us off type of thing. We were small town, it would no problem dropping us off at the theater. But I remember seeing the movie kind of in that weird awkward phase where I was kind of aware that when I got home my cat wasn't gonna be there, but still I'm kind of watching the movie, so I'm kind of like, this feels wrong. I kind of have a knot in my stomach, but then you're still a kid, so you're starting to like forget about things and pay attention to the movie. It was just a very weird, awkward experience for me, and I have never seen that movie since. And I
Yeah.
don't want to ever again. It's just, it was just a weird experience. But I felt bad. I mean, looking back, I feel bad for my mom now because, well, hell, I think first off, she probably had to leave the cat at the house at the time to take, like this is so long ago. I'm just trying to remember it. It's
Yeah,
just I felt
what your
bad for her.
family will do to make sure you don't know what's going on, especially when you're a kid, and you're like completely just like, I guess not really like, I would say kind of like not appreciative of it, but you just don't understand the situation. You just have your own thoughts. Like, I want to go to the movies. You tell me you can't go to the
Yeah.
movies. Like, dude, that is it really brings like later down the road when you're looking back at those situations, like, holy shit, you guys really went all out of your way for it.
To defend the kid, I mean, like to protect you from these things that they just don't want you to know until you get older. And some people get a little bit more protected than other people. I actually kind of look back and think my parents were a little bit too like lax with me and making me sort of follow through on things. I was kind of like all over the place with my interests and stuff like that and everything. And going to LA and kind of really just trying to make it on my own, that was my college. Like even though I went to college in my 20s, I went to LA in my 30s. Like I LA was my college on like how to be like an adult and everything. And I look back and I kind of like waited to do little things here and there, but I appreciate that they tried to protect me at all points in time from emotional harm and everything as well as physical harm. And I appreciate that they did the best that they could, as two individual adults who went their separate ways, after having a kid,
Well,
and
it's like
and
you
I
look at a doctor and you think they have all the answers, but no, they're
yeah.
just a regular dude trying to figure it out just like you know what I mean? And
We're all just regular dudes just trying to figure it out. I mean,
exactly.
everyone is just trying to figure it out. Like really, like at 42, I don't know anything, man. Like I really don't. I have no answers. You know what I mean? Like I haven't learned anything more than anyone else at this point.
And it's like we're all on journeys too. Like, I mean, if you want to talk about like, I looked at my dad as like a fucking Superman. I mean, ever since I was a little kid, like he was like the person you want to idolize to be and stuff. And then you find out as an adult, it's like, oh, he was barely holding it together. You know what I
Right?
mean?
Yeah.
And like, I remember as a kid, like I almost drowned when I was really, really little. So in Florida, they have a sandbar and it's a giant drop off. So nobody was really paying attention. I was
Mm.
probably like 2 or 3 years old and I walked to the water and I stepped in and I thought I could keep on going and I hit a sandbar and went completely under. So like, I just have this image that's imprinted in my head of like half like one of my eyes out of the water looking at the tree line and then the other eye underwater and it just kept going up and down like the drowning part. I remember I went down for like the last time basically and all I feel is some dude grabbed me by my hair and I had really curly hair and straight up ripped me up out of the water and then put me up on his shoulder. I'm looking down. I felt like I was on a skyscraper and I was like, what the hell? And I look over, it's my dad. Like my dad's
That's awesome.
like freaking out, like, that type of thing. But like it stuck out into my mind. And then like you want to talk about not wanting a movie to ever be over. I watched King Kong, Peter Jackson, whatever it's
Yeah.
called,
Yeah.
in theaters, which is like a 3 hour fucking movie. But that day I got my report card from school and I was in the fifth grade and it was all F's and I knew I was going to be severely grounded. It said like teacher wanted the parents to come in. So I was like, I'm going to put this in my book bag. And then I was supposed to tell them that night. And we went to the movies and I like the whole entire time, like, I want this movie to keep on fucking lasting because I don't want to get home where I have to explain to them this and everything. I'm going to get it. And I remember just on the ride home, like I'm just sitting in the car, like we're all like, oh, this movie was awesome. I can't believe how intense that was. King Kong looks so realistic. And I'm like, I got my report card. It's all F's, and the teacher wants to see you guys, and I'm pretty sure I'm gonna be expelled. And they're just like, what? And like everything. I was just like, the movie's over. I got my candy. I'm good. And I'm just like sitting there taking it like a champ.
Oh, you're probably the only person in the world that wanted that movie to be even longer than it
Dude, it
was.
if like someone asked me to watch it now, I immediately think of that. I'm like, that movie's like 6 hours long. It's like, no, it's like 2 hours and 20 minutes. I'm like, nah, it's 6 hours long,
Yeah.
dude.
Yeah, my dad's a big dude too. Like he's like 6 foot something, and he's the loudest guy in the room. Like and he was a car salesman forever. He was a cop, then he was a car salesman, used car salesman forever. And I mean, he can sell ice to an Eskimo, And but he's like the loudest guy in the room and everything. And I'm just like, I got a little bit of him, but just not so much. He definitely overpowers me as far as like voice and presence go and everything. But sometimes, it creates a little bit of a thing for, as a kid, you want to live up to that. And as you get older, you just gotta accept that, what, you're your own person. You're not your parents, you're your own person. You're the best of them, you're the worst of them. And
Well, it's like when you're
you
a teenager too, you have that moment where you're like, I can take you. Like I can
yeah.
definitely take you. Like, you get like that I had that once, and like I'll never forget because like my dad was always like really good. He was always the power figure kind of in the group because he's 6'3". I'm like 5'9", but I mean I was always a small kid. But the way my dad grew up was in Baltimore. So my grandfather, his name's Rocky, and they called him Rocky because he's like 6'7". I mean, this man, when he takes crab shells, he sticks them in between two of his fingers and cracks them that way instead of doing it like the other way. He has big boxing rings on his hands, probably the size of my head. He's just very intimidating. But like, he'll sit there with his arms crossed at the end of the table, all intimidating and stuff. But then when he starts talking, he's like me. He's like
Yeah.
really like joking around and stuff. But he was always serious his whole life, like through my dad, through walls and stuff. My dad would always talk about, and my dad said he remembered the time he hit him back, and then they never recovered from that. Like even now, it's a little bit awkward. Like you still sense it a little bit, even though they hug and stuff. But that's what happened one time when I thought I could take him. At one point, like I was just sick of it. I'm like 16 years old. I'm like, oh, tell me what to do. And like you go to swing, and that's where he stopped, and he just walked away. And he was like, I saw that moment coming up and stuff. And it's like you got to realize like how hard they're actually trying to get together because they're trying to figure it out too. Like for a lot of people, it's you're their first kid, and each kid's different, so it's like a trial run.
Yeah, yeah. I'm an only child, although I have a stepsister. So when my dad remarried, she had a daughter that she had adopted. So she was my sister, 6 years older than me, and we're close. I consider her my sister, but technically we have no blood relation. Yet we're both blonde hair, fair skin, blue eyes. So luckily, we actually look like siblings, and we have a great relationship now.
Hitler's perfect
Yeah,
dream.
exactly. Pretty much. Yeah. It's, I mean, coming from Maryland, a lot of German, right? My mom's side is pretty much all German, and my dad's side is Scottish and Irish. But like my dad is still a big dude, and I've never tried to take him because even to today I cannot take him. He is a big guy. He's kind of like your dad. He's like 6'3", and I'm kind of like 5'10", but I'm not particularly like beefy or anything. And my dad's got that big like beer belly too, so he's got like a lot of mass that he can put behind it. So I'm still waiting to usurp his power when he's on his deathbed. I keep telling him, like, I'm going to take all your power.
It's crazy because like people are going to be like, why do they just talk about their families? It's like, no, because that's the biggest influences into what we like today. All those moments we had, I don't know how many, like the only reason I'm into football is because when we would watch football, it'd be me and my dad eating like Tostitos chips with his homemade chili, watching a Ravens game or something. I
Yeah,
remember when they won the 2012 Super Bowl or something. That was amazing. I
yeah.
never we went there to go get the trophy and stuff. Three people got stabbed in a matter of 20 minutes, and they ended up
That's,
leaving early. It
that's
freaking was
Baltimore, baby.
it was nuts, dude. Oh my god.
Dude, my dad had season tickets from the first season, so we found his. They got those three pillars around the park, and with everyone's name, I think who had like basically the first season, and we found his name on it, so it's still there. Yeah, man. I grew up in a Redskins household with my mom, but much to her chagrin, I became a Ravens fan, and to this day, I'm a Ravens guy. I'm not a Redskins fan. Although I will say it was kind of hard maintaining my fandom on the West Coast because I mean, if I was going to watch a football Ravens game, I'd have to go to the bar, and it would have to be like at 9 a.m. And you can't go to a bar and just stand there. You got to
Yeah.
drink. So you'd be trashed by like 1 o'clock. And I almost got kicked out of the bar with Richard Tyson. He was in Black Hawk Down. He was in 3 O'clock High. Oh, have you ever seen Kindergarten Cop with
Yeah.
okay, he was the bad guy. He was the
Oh
who's your
shit.
daddy and
Yeah.
what does he
Yeah.
do? Yeah, he was the bad guy, Richard Tyson. So I'm at this local bar in Santa Monica just watching the Ravens getting drunk, and Richard Tyson's there, and I'm like, oh, it's that guy. I recognize him. And then he's drunk as a skunk at like noon, and so he moseys up next to me. We're talking back and forth, and then he starts like throwing coasters at the bartender, and he I'm like, what are you doing? And then she gets pissed off at him, and like she kicks him out, and she looks at me, and I'm like, I don't even know this guy. Don't kick me out too. So to this day, Richard Tyson I consider as my arch nemesis.
Yeah, it's like well, my cousin, so he's my long lost cousin. When I was talking about my brother's grandparents, because we're half siblings, this is my brother's cousin. So we didn't know he existed. He spent the summer with us because my grandma had 4 kids and one of them died at like 20, and apparently he had a kid no one knew about. So then we find out about when this kid's the age of 30. So this was just like about maybe a year and a half ago. So he spent the summer with me, and I remember we're talking about like famous people and like how like you come across some famous people or something like from a film that you really really love that means a lot more to you, and then to someone who's ever seen the films like who's that, I don't give a shit. And I remember like I was talking about like, yeah, my all-time favorite movie, Big Lebowski. He's like, yeah, the guy who plays in that movie, what's his name, he was my babysitter. I'm like, who was your babysitter?
Who? You
Your
can't forget the
John
name.
Goodman was your babysitter? And he goes, no, 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 no. What's his name? He has a mustache, has a really deep voice. I'm like, Sam Elliott was your fucking babysitter? He goes, yeah, yeah, that guy. I'm like, what? He goes,
Oh
yeah.
my
And he starts
god.
walking away from me. I'm like, hold on, come back here, Sam Elliott. He goes, yeah, I used to live next to him back in the day when I was a little kid, and he used to babysit me all the time. It's no big deal, Robbie. It's just somebody. Fame is nothing. It's just a person. I'm like,
Yeah.
hang on, okay, I guess I get that, but damn, Sam Elliott. And then he starts walking away, and he goes, hey, and I met Ric Flair in an airport. I'm like, get the fuck back here.
Woo!
Like, holy crap.
Who is your favorite celebrity you've met? Have you met
Hmm. I don't think I've met really anybody like super particular, like it's my favorite celebrity. I remember my dad met Wee Man and took a picture, and I actually have an autographed photo basically staring straight in front of me. It's Wee Man pointing down, and it says, love you, Rob, keep up the work or whatever. Cause like,
Oh,
I don't know, I was doing something in school, like a giant project. My dad was just going on and on and on about. So he signed it, everything. I'll send you a picture of it and all too. It's
nice.
pretty sick though, because like it's a Secrets radio station where my dad works, used to work.
Oh, well, do you mean
So
the Secrets is in the bar slash restaurant?
yeah, yeah. So
Okay.
the radio station. So I used to go there as a little kid, and I used to go up all around. Like I would see my dad doing the "You're listening to 98.1," like that whole like voice and everything like that.
Yeah.
So I know exactly where they took that picture and stuff too. So I look at that, I'm like, oh, that shit, that's right in front of that. You know what I mean? It's pretty interesting. But like when it comes to fame, I mean, the biggest, it's not even an actor, it was a musician. I've met all musicians because they'll play live licks at 6 on the radio or something, so I know that, and I get free concert tickets to a lot of stuff. But
Yeah.
I'm a big comedy fan, so I'm always
Okay.
trying to get shows to those. But I met the singer for Slightly Stupid, my very first concert I really ever went to, and he gave me a joint to smoke because it was my birthday. So I was like fucking ready, dude. Like that was a memory that stuck out in my mind. And then you figure out they're just high school wrestling coaches that are in this reggae band. Like it's nuts.
I had a Birdman steal my lighter, and I never got that back. And he to
Birdman.
smoke the biggest joint I've ever seen in my life. When I worked in L.A., I worked at a photography studio downtown, and we did like a lot of urban mags, quote unquote urban mags, and we shot like Ti, Nas. We were Coco Ice T's girlfriend's main photographer. So like one time we shot Coco, like Ice T would just kind of be chilling in the green room, and he's an old dude, so he'd usually just be asleep on the couch. He's not a young buck anymore. But honestly, Ti was one of the nicest people I ever met. He was like super super polite and nice and really cool dude. Birdman was fine, nothing. He just was like, anybody got a lighter? And I smoked cigarettes. I was like, here you go. And he had the biggest entourage I've ever seen in my life.
I
And
really like that when people talk about like the good parts about like these celebrities and stuff that don't get their fame. I remember my dad met his all-time favorite like heroes, Kiss, when he was in that commercial, and he was like, I love Kiss. I really do. But Gene Simmons is a fucking dick. And I'm like, what? He goes, dude, he's just the meanest, bossiest guy ever. I'm like, damn, that sucks, man. You would think that like that's gotta crush your soul as like having a hero. Like you hear about Bill Murray being like this really cool guy, and he
yeah.
he would take people's French fries as like at a restaurant or something, and they would take it like Bill Murray just took my French fries. He goes, nobody's gonna believe you, and then he just
Yeah,
walks away. It's like, holy
no,
shit, like
I
that's
know.
amazing.
Go ahead and tell people. Ain't nobody gonna believe you. I think for me, sort of the biggest growing growing up loving aliens, like I said, and movies like Terminator. I met Michael Biehn. He played Hicks in Aliens. He played Kyle Reese in Terminator, and he was. I mean, he's so cool. His characters that he played are so cool. He was the opposite of that. He was kind of like a little bit of a weirdo, but like not in a bad way. You know what I mean? Like I was like, okay, I don't know if I needed to meet you, but it wasn't a bad experience. You know, he was super nice. He was super nice. He was just a little bit weirder than say Hicks or Kyle Reese. You know?
Who's that guy, Jean-Claude Van Damme? I listened to the Crab Feast podcast I was telling you about, and they interview like comedy people. It's basically Ryan Sickler and Jay Larson that like are these two comedians that have these people come on and they laugh at all your bad moments. There's like I always praise this guy Steve Cantwell. I follow him. He had a salvia trip. That's like the most insane thing. I'll have to send you that to listen to because you'll trip your balls off. It's like a 4 hour long podcast. They did it in 2 episodes, but shit was nuts. But they were talking to a guy who was a stunt double actor on there, and he worked with Jean-Claude Van Damme, and you picture him as like this badass like dude. Apparently, he was an asshole. Like apparently,
Yeah.
he literally was like he would show you that he was tougher than you. Like they would do a thing where he was supposed to swing and he was supposed to miss or look like it was supposed to hit him. He would actually hit you just to show you like who's the top dog here. And I'm like,
Yeah.
damn, that sucks, man. When you got people like that.
Yeah, no, and sadly, I've heard similar, stories about Jean-Claude Van Damme. Now, granted, I think a lot of them are like a little bit older. I think he's might have calmed down a bit now, but yeah, it's sad because I loved him growing up. He was my favorite guy of all of that era, the Chuck Norris and this and that. I like Jean-Claude Van Damme and I like Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I've heard good things about JCVD now, but I've heard bad things like you just said about him back in the day. I think reality just had to check them. I think you know what I mean? Like I think sometimes, and that happens to all of us, we get a little bit too big for our britches, a little bit too overly confident, and reality says, you know what? You gotta think of other people sometimes, and boom, it checks you. It's happened to me, happens to a lot of people, and because I think at the end of the day, we're not supposed to be dicks. Like you can be confident and not be a dick about it. And true confidence comes from the fact that you don't really care what other people think, and and thus you don't really have to be a dick about it. I think that's what I'm just trying to say. At the end of the day, we're all dicks sometimes, and
Yeah.
reality kind of checks us back for that. And I think it's a good
Be
thing.
Who would be one of your all-time favorite actors you would want to go like see the most if you could run into anybody?
Well, it won't be an actor. It'll be a director. The one director that I would give anything to meet and thus do drugs with is Richard Stanley. He directed Hardware, which came out in 1990, but just recently he directed that Nicolas Cage movie Color Out of Space. And if you want to go check out some guy's life story, his is crazy. Especially go watch the documentary. It's called Lost Soul: the doomed journey of Richard Stanley's Island of Dr. Moreau. That Val Kilmer movie that came out in the 90s with Marlon Brando, Island of Dr. Moreau movie. It was supposed to be his. Another director did it, and because he had this mental breakdown and spiral. And now like 20 years later he's back doing Color Out of Space. But the reason I love him is because he's very much into magic, and I don't mean Magic the Gathering, I mean magic with a K. I mean like ritual magic, all that kind of stuff, Order of the Golden Dawn, Crowley, all that kind of stuff. He's huge into that, and he thinks on another level. It's so interesting to me. And if you want to hear a really interesting podcast, the podcast is called Visitations, and it's hosted by Elijah Wood and the other guy who produced Spectre Vision is their company. Elijah Wood and this other guy, Spectre Vision's their company. They put out that Maniac remake that Elijah Wood was in it, and they produced Color Out of Space. And the two of them interview Richard Stanley on the set of Color Out of Space, but they talk to him about stuff. And man, that guy is just, I mean, he's just got concepts that are you're just like, holy crap. And man, I just want to fucking do drugs with him and just get inside his brain. He's like my spirit animal. I love him so much.
All right, so I'm about to give you ever heard of the question or the thing fuck Mary kill?
Yeah, of
Okay, so I'm
course.
about to say who would you drink with, who would you smoke with, and who would you fight?
Definitely smoke with Richard Stanley.
Okay.
That's for definite sure. Honestly, at this day and age, you know what? I would like to have a drink with, go back and actually have a drink with Michael Bean and kind of revisit that conversation and maybe just kind of recalibrate my conversation with him. And then fight. Oh man, I
One of
never
those
really had.
actors you got to fight. You got to fight one
I
of them.
I know, I know. I'm trying to recall something, and I'm not. Damn, I'm not having. I can't come up on top of my head. I'm not an aggressive person. I think. Shoot, I may have to circle back around to that
I
one. I'm
look, I'll tell
sorry.
you, I would want to get a beer with Liam Neeson
Okay.
or Sam
Okay.
Elliott, depending on what we're going for. We're going for a sarsaparilla. I would definitely
Yeah.
go with
Yeah.
Sam
Yeah.
Elliott. To smoke, it would definitely be with the dude from the Big Lebowski. I know what his real name is, but that's what I call him, and that's what I'll
Yeah.
know
The
him
dude,
as.
of course.
But and then fight Jerry Seinfeld.
I was gonna say I bet my wife would want to fight Jerry Seinfeld.
Knock those
But
horse teeth right out of his mouth.
what's the deal with fighting?
I mean, come on. You
I
could have
know, I know.
uppercut to my face.
And it's funny because like you asked me that question. I know it's hypothetical, but you're also talking to a guy who's never been in a fight before. I've always been more of an artist and kind of like that guy in like school that just I was friends with every single like somebody from every group, you know. So even though like I was a nerd in high school, I never got picked on because I was so friendly. I kind of just knew every single group, and then I drew, and everyone was always like, "Oh, cool, can you draw this?" Usually boobs or something. I'm like, "Sure," you know. And so like I kind of endeared myself to other people.
You
So
just
I just
reminded me of Super Bad when he was drawing dicks all
yes,
over the
yeah, I
paper.
was instead of dicks, I was boobs, and so of course everyone's like, "Oh, dude, that's awesome!" All the jocks loved it, but I was more friends with like the nerds and everything. But like, yeah, man, it's weird because like fighting is just like kind of like not in my vocabulary.
I'm not a fan
It's
of it either. I don't even like watching UFC. My brother was
yeah,
always like the one that would like he would bounce and stuff, and he would get all into that. Like that was just we constantly get letters in the mail saying he has to go to a court or something because he abused somebody or he did something or handled somebody a little too roughly, and that was just him to get his form of aggression out. I was always like when a fight would happen, you get real nervous, feel like you got a shit or something. But
yeah,
like my all mine came from somebody thinking they could take me just because I wouldn't talk or something. And next thing you know, it turns into like I always fought back. And
okay,
like those are crazy ass moments too. Because my dad was like, just never, throw the first punch. We talk about the
right,
family structure in us in a way. It's like, just don't be an asshole. Don't be the bully. Don't be a thing. I mean, I had my own childhood stuff going on that was a bit of a mess and stuff. I mean, but I just acted out in school because school never gave me a shot. I mean, if I always say they could fix the education system, they legit just took the time to ask kids, like give them a survey, what do you like to learn? If somebody would have came to me and said, would you like to learn something about Greek mythology or maybe be like conspiracy theories or government programs or learning about history, I would have went all out on that. But no, they threw me in algebra 1, which I failed 3 times, to the point they put me in a freaking what they would call it's called Bridges Credit Recovery, which is basically alternative education, which is like I'm in here with all the bad kids that smoke cigarettes on property and shit. And the teacher knew I slipped through the system because my
yeah,
senior and junior or my junior, the ending of my junior year and my senior year, they were like, you don't have enough math credits to graduate. I'm like, you guys didn't give me math for 4 years. Like, that's
yeah.
you guys, not me. And they're like, okay, we're going to put you in this. All I got to do is show up. So I would just show up and get an A. So I would just sit there on my phone the whole time and play around. And he would just pull up Walking Dead, and we're watching like Walking Dead on his computer. So I'd be like, Rob, isn't this awesome? And some kid would be like, some kid's like, what do you guys watch? He's like, you shut the fuck up. And like, Rob, come over here. It's like, because I was a good one. I wasn't supposed to be in there, but it was like,
Yeah, you're like, sure, I'll benefit from this.
yeah,
Yeah,
Chris
man.
Hardwick.
I mean, like, dude, I mean, I was an artist growing up, and I mean, I'm still an artist. I mean, that's what I associate myself with. And like, yeah, dude, I did not do well with like numbers. I still don't do well with numbers. My wife handles all the finances. I should not be trusted with the finances of the household. It's just, it's not my strong suit. My strong suit is building and creating, and that's what I do. And I mean, honestly, man, like it took me 40 years to kind of figure out what I was good at. I was, for a while, I was doing like website stuff and everything when I was out in LA. And, like I'm always in one foot into this creative world and then another foot, like, trying to find a job and, this and that. My parents like, oh, you got to get it. What are you doing? You got to get a job. I'm like, yeah, you're right. I guess you're right and everything. And it wasn't until I kind of did podcasting and I fell into this thing where I'm like, I love it. I'm good at it. And you know what? I just finally kind of committed fully into something. And I find that the universe is kind of rewarding that. And you know, I have to say it with the caveat that like I can only do it because my wife allows it, like she's okay with it. She supports me. She's supportive of it. She believes in what I'm doing. But and also she makes a good income. She's supporting us right now, but with the hopes that things are gonna blow up and everything. But I it feels great to actually be doing something that I love and something that I feel like I'm built for. But like it's just like just how my mind works, and everything. And I try to explain it to my parents and stuff. It's weird. You have to explain these things when you're 42 to your parents, but when you're an artist, you always have to sort of explain why you're not making any money, and
Well, Da
it's just
Vinci was considered batshit insane. He's probably one of
right.
my all-time favorite. If I had to ask you, what is one person in history you would want to meet? Maybe not a director, it could be anybody, a scientist, any time period, whatever you want to say. For me, it would be Leonardo da Vinci because that man to me, like just from playing the Assassin's Creed games, is what I know him as. But like it
Yeah.
caused me to look up my own research into him. Like I have, a couple of his paintings, like that are like copies, obviously, but they're sitting around in my room. I learned to enjoy a little bit more because I think where you kind of talked about wanting to meet directors and you kind of really fascinated with the whole creative and producing side of things that you kind of do with your podcast as well to kind of spin it back. But it comes from an aspect of like you really love the artistic aspect of all of that stuff, the crazy combinations of build up things that go into something to designing a movie. I
Yeah.
took communication arts class, which was like filming a little bit, and I learned about low angles, high angles, side angles, right? Front views, back views, third person perspective, second person perspective, whatever. And now when I look at a film, I'm analyzing all those things. Like I was given the hidden details to it where someone else would just be like staring at it. Like, is it
Hmm.
relying on the script? Is it relying on the actors? Relying on the story? What is it relying on? Why is it the anger? Maybe that shaky camera angle is a little bit of it's messing up the scene. You start to notice things like that. Like, I think we spend too much time trying to be our own independent selves and then end up finding at a later point in our life that we circle back around to exactly what our initial inspirations were, which were probably our biggest influences for most of us, which is our parents or
Yeah.
someone that was really connected to us. Because I mean, for so long, I could have easily thrown out my parents' name. Like my dad, Skip Dixon, and people were like, "What?" And doors, jobs would have opened up for me in this town, but I didn't do it because I wanted to make a name for myself. I was trying to find myself. What did I want to do? Did I want to be a skateboarder? Did I want to be an artist? Do I want to study psychology? Do I want to help people with chemical dependency? Next thing I know, freaking podcasting. I love doing it. I love talking. And my dad's like, "Yeah, you know what I do, right?" I'm like, "Yeah, you're a radio station guy." He goes, "As you've been around it so much, it's normalized to you. You're good at talking to people." And I'm like, "Okay."
Well, let me ask you this: what does your dad think of podcasting? Like, just as the whole thing that's going on with this explosion of podcasts and stuff. I mean, because he's an old school radio guy.
He doesn't even listen to radio. He when he goes and does like he barely listens to my podcast. I think I'll show him like send him an episode where I'll mention him like the time we went camping or something. I mean, he's supportive of it, but it's just like
Yeah.
he really clarified to me at one point in my life when I would ask him, I was like, "Why aren't we listening to music when we're driving, going out to the campground, Fort Whaley or something?" And he was like, "I like listening to nothing because I listen to it all day." And he goes, "What I really enjoy is the sound that nature makes. That's my music." And it fucking hit me. And I was like, damn. And just to see, like, I would see him out on nights, like just sitting out by the bonfire before the sun goes down, just staring up, taking a nice deep breath, like, beer in his hand or something, and really taking in you hear the trees and the swishing, that sound. That's what I love. Like, if you see a really good film that incorporates that sound in there, like
Yeah.
it's so peaceful and serene to me where I'm like, that's so enjoyable. And you look at a lot of stuff, everything's an explosion, everything's like
Yeah.
it's cool, but fuck, like let's get a build up. Like another good cult series movie you want to talk about, the Cohen brothers when they released the Ballad of Buster Scruggs. I just showed somebody in my family that movie last night, the stories behind it. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but
I have not
I
seen it.
highly recommend this movie. It's up like 6 short films, short little like stories
Yeah.
basically in
Yeah.
one. Dude, they all have some random twists and turns and some dark humor type shit that's just like The Big Lebowski and everything.
Yeah, I like the Coen Brothers. The Fargo's is fantastic. The TV show, I love that. Circling back to your dad, it sounds that's interesting, man. It sounds like he's very sort of. I don't want to speak for you or whatever, but it sounds like he's kind of in tune to himself at the very least, and he knows like sort of what he needs as a soul at that point. You know, he's like that's actually kind of nice, man, to have him like be able to like, you know what, this is what I need right now, and to be able to express that, you know, well and
It's
everything.
probably the
Because
same thing you see with like Michael Bay or like a famous director that does the same genre of movie all the time. Like M. Night Shyamalan probably is like, I don't want to fucking do a drama anymore. I want to do an
yeah,
action or something, you know. And then he went off and did something else and then came back to it. It's like you do it so much, you end up being like, I want to do something different, change it up a little bit, but then you end up falling right back to it.
of course, yeah, it's everything you know. And my parents are the same way. They're supportive. They're super supportive, although they don't quite understand, or at first they didn't understand what podcasting was. But luckily, like radio stations have now started promoting podcasts like on the radio. So like when that happened, and then like once we kind of got on iHeartRadio and stuff and everything, like they started like being able to connect to things like, okay, so you're kind of like on the radio. And it's like, well, yeah, I'm kind of on the radio, but it's sort of on the internet. You know, you can get it anywhere. But it took a while for them to sort of get it. They're all happy that I'm doing something that I love. They can tell that I'm good at it. They're just, you know, they're like, what's it going to lead to? And I'm like, this, like, you know, and I'm kind of like doing the reverse, you know, like I'm not making too much money doing it, but I'm doing my end goal. Like this is right now currently is my end goal. This is what I want to get to. So like it's hard for me to sort of backtrack. You know, like a lot of people when they start a company, they're like, okay, I need to work a part-time job and like to sort of inject some cash into it or here and there. And I'm like, man, I'm already at that point. I just need, you know, and you know, it'll all pop eventually. But yeah, right now is a very bad time for for anything financial with the what's going on currently in the world, which I'm glad we didn't really talk
Right.
about.
Yeah, it's a great time you get to your recording in, but when it comes to listens and stuff, you start to realize that people aren't on their daily commute. Your listening goes down a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, have you found has your listener, yeah, your download numbers have actually gone down a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I started noticing that, and like people are trying their best, but it's like you're sitting at home with your family, not able to go anywhere or something. You know, you're not going to listen to a podcast. Like, I mean,
No.
for me, I'm like, I've always kind of been pretty independent, besides like, you know, just needing a really like a place like over my head or something. But when it comes to food, when it comes to like bills, I can do a lot of that on my own, you know, gas and
Yeah.
all that. But I'm always constantly have headphones in. I'm always listening to a podcast. I'm either editing a podcast. I'm so involved in it now. I use my TV as background noise. I mean, I just started watching the show Community, and I've never laughed so fucking hard in my life because of Chevy Chase. Like that is the funniest stuff in the world. And it's like that's when you start to look at stuff like maybe I would be better like I could totally change up the format of my show to just be comedy, just be jokes, just do, you know, whatever, like maybe do a horror film. Because if you notice all the horror podcasts, true crime podcasts, comedy podcasts, whatever, movie podcasts, they all get so many followers so quickly because people just want to see that's an easy concept to go up. It's so popular.
Yeah.
It's hard to get one that's just conversation because people are like, what the fuck does this person have to say? You know what I mean? But it's like,
But the cool thing is they have cool stuff to say, because I've listened to a couple of years and I really liked I forgot what her name was, and I apologize to the young lady, but she has a business that she's a baker. She works from home, but she's also like an entrepreneur, and she was a baker talking about cakes and stuff like that. And yeah, man, like you guys sounded great, and I found that to be very interesting. Me personally, I connect to podcasts with the hosts. I like usually the rapport between the hosts, and for your podcast, it's always you with somebody else. So you don't get a chance to sort of like build up that back and forth rapport. But I think you personally do a fantastic job of sort of maintaining your own rapport. But for me, like I'm like you, if I'm not editing a podcast, if I'm like cleaning the apartment or something like that, because I very much my wife works like almost 50 hours a week. I do not want her to do a single thing in the apartment. I want her, I clean, do laundry, everything, so that she can just come home and relax. But man, I'm like you. I'm the exact opposite of your father. I can't have silence. I can't listen to silence because my mind will start to spiral. So I kind of use podcasting and everything to just keep me level, keep me it's almost how I medicate myself, because I find if I'm not, I start scattering. I'm like, what do I do next? I've got so many things I need to do. But if I just start make a list, have a podcast in the back of my head, I don't start thinking about those other things. I just start crossing things off the list. But dude, I'm like you, man. I always have one in my ear. I'm always listening. And and also at the same time, I get all my podcast recommendations from other podcasts. So do you have a particular podcast that you're kind of in love with right now that you would recommend to me?
It's been the same one I've been listening to probably for the past year. I started off with Joe Rogan. So a lot of people
Mm,
that listen to me know this already about me. I'm a fitness freak. I've
yeah.
gone to the gym every single day for 7 years, and you know that shit ain't stopping for coronavirus. I got the key to my gym. It's a thousand something dollar or $5,000 fine, I think, if I get caught. But I go at 2 o'clock in the morning,
Yeah,
so
there you
you're
go.
not fucking getting me. Um,
Yeah.
but like at the same time, like when I first started, I was listening to Joe Rogan. So my workout's the length of a Joe Rogan podcast. So it's 2.5 hours or something. So I would
Yeah.
listen to that religiously. Then I found Your Mom's House podcast, and then I switched over to what I've been listening to like over and over again. They have about 400 episodes, plus the Honeydew is the new spinoff one they have. Um, it's the Crab Feast, and that's just because
Yeah.
they're real people telling real stories about their life. You have like Alicia Tyler, who played in like Balls of Fury. She was the
Okay.
tall
Yeah.
black chick. Yeah, she was she was on there talking about all these bad moments in her life. She missed a Oprah show, that she her first Oprah official like showing because 9/11 happened. Like that she never got Oprah because Oprah quit after that. So it was like
Yeah.
she talks about that. It's all jokes and cracks on lives like their drug addictions or something that happened in their life that they choose to be so upset about. But I recommend that one to you. I'll even send you that freaking Salvia episode, which is like my all-time favorite. I listened to that 4 times already today because
Please do, because
it's
when
so
I do
trippy.
listen to Joe Rogan, I don't like subscribe, but I'll listen to like handpicked ones that people sort of send me. It's always the weird drug episodes or the weird alien episodes or stuff like that. That's the kind of stuff that I like. As far as like, and oh, by the way, Aisha Tyler, I love Balls of Fury, man. That
Yeah,
movie
that's my
is.
all-time probably like favorite movie too, right there.
Dude, what does he say? Time has not been kind to you. I will not be kind to you. I love that movie, dude. Dude, Balls of Fury is one of my favorite
Don't
comedies of
know
all
what the
time.
hell he meant by Shaka Genyao, and he
Oh,
tosses
God.
him through the fucking thing. Freaking George
Milo.
Lopez shoves toilet paper in Randy's mouth and sticks his hand inside the bathroom stall and cracks it. Oh, dude, that made me clench. I was like, oh,
Dude, I'll still say to my friends, I go, Randy,
Randy
Randy.
Daytona. How
I
was
love it.
Disney World?
Oh man, I love that movie. Anyways, that's a great movie. But yeah, man, I like the weird drug stuff and everything. As
Oh,
far
hold on. I just thought of this scene where he goes, I'm gonna get the panda. He runs by and then he comes back, panda's dead. And he freaking runs out.
God, so good, so good. I need to rewatch that movie. If you're looking for some cryptid stuff or whatever, there's one that I absolutely love. It's called Strange Familiars, and he's actually in Pennsylvania. So, but he talks a lot about Maryland stuff and Maryland folklore and things like that. And the cool thing is because we have such a strong German heritage in Maryland. There's a lot of like Maryland, a lot of German folklore in Maryland, like Krampus and Belsnickel and stuff like that. And it's just I dig that kind of stuff. It kind of made me sort of refall in love with Maryland, even though I'm now 3,000 miles away. Although Oregon definitely feels more like Maryland than LA ever did.
Well, you would like the Crab Feast because Ryan Sickler, he's a comic from Baltimore. So he
Okay.
mentions all the time going to Ocean City as a kid. And he was like, yeah, they have places named like Big Peckers or something like that. Like it's a funny, but people like where we are, like you hear it and you're like, holy shit, like I remember that place, and they crack jokes on that stuff. And he would always they bring up stories like how I kind of do, where like I'll be talking to you, ask you your experience, and I'll give you one of my experiences, kind of so it's like a back and forth type thing. That's what he kind of does too, but it's a lot interesting because like his moments, like his dad died when he was like 16, but he ended up living with his grandma. But he says he's 3 for 4 with saving lives because he gave his grandma CPR and actually killed her. um, but like he talks, but he cracks jokes on it. So it's cracking light of that. Like his dad was having a heart attack and he's driving him to the hospital, and his dad's like, "Turn right here. The hospital's right here." He goes, "No, it's the next right." And he misses it and he goes, "Oh shit, it was that right." And then his dad, like, it didn't kill him, but it didn't help him.
It
You know
didn't
what I
help the
mean?
situation
So
at
like
all.
they crack jokes on that, and it's funny to hear people laugh at those things that, like, that's just what I really like. I literally like when a podcast is relatable, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like I love enjoying like good movie podcasts too, because I like kind of seeing it. I mean, I've talked to so many people. In the start, a lot of them were podcasters, and I started talking to everyone. But like for you, where did the link for horror come from?
I always grew up watching horror movies with my friends, and to be truthful with you, is probably because it was the easiest place to see boobs, right? Like horror movies always had that, right?
The only
Especially in the
reason I
80s.
watched Piranha 3D, and then you end up seeing too much shit where you don't want to go to a water park ever.
Yes, yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
I watched that, and then that summer I worked at a water park. You know how hard that was for me to do anything. Rob, go in there and throw some tubes out of the water. I'm not
Nope.
fucking going in there.
I saw Piranha 3D. I know what happens.
Grabbing the freaking pole, the pool pole and shit, trying to scoop them out, and people are like, "Get that out of my face!" I'm like, "Just
I know, man. Actually, I like that movie. I thought that was fun. But yeah, I mean, for me and my buddy Zach with the horror one, I mean, it's not all horror, essentially. There's a lot of sci-fi, a lot of action stuff. But, it's a way for us to be connected as friends, especially he's in a different city. He's in LA. He's over in Santa Monica. And we've never been closer now that we do the podcast together, and I kind of feel like when you get older, there's so many things going on that like I kind of have to have something that I'm doing with my friends to keep it connected. Otherwise, it's like, man, especially with I don't want to say with me, it's like, oh, I'm doing a lot of things that are creative, and I connect to people with through the creativity and through the projects. That's not to say that I don't talk to my friends with that I don't, but I just don't have as much of a
I've t-
chance to.
I've talked about it before a few times. I started noticing a lot of people were starting podcasts as friend groups and things because it's like the same equivalent to going out to a bar with your friends. It's an
Yeah,
event or something. But how many times those events get canceled because life is just really fucking draining. There's a lot to do. You don't end up hanging out as much as you did like you did in high school, not going over each other's friends' houses anymore. I mean, I barely messaged my one best friend that I started the podcast with. He was my first guest or something. But like, I used to go over his house every single day because that was like just what we did. We used to hung out. We were so close. We were in school together, all this stuff. And then as you got older, bills, work, all these other things come into factors.
yeah,
You don't have time. You start having your own like family, you start having your own kids. I started noticing people were increasing starting podcasts with friends just to be able to hang out together. Like, oh man, I don't want to go over your house to record this episode. Then when they get there, they're like, why did I not want to come over here? This is fucking awesome. And they're having fun. My first 80 something episodes were in person. So they were coming over my house. People that I would be like, "Hey, how's it going?" It's like, "Hi, man. My name's James." I'm like, "James, introduce yourself on the podcast. Let's get to know each other." And I would just run
yeah.
upstairs, and next thing you know, they're in my house. Like I'm inviting strangers over, basically. And I would talk to a bunch of people from school. Like it would, you know how hard it is to be able to post an episode or record an episode when people will just bail out because you actually have to go to someone's house. This is 1,000 times easier because it's over. You can be in your sweatpants and fucking do it. I only take the
I'm in
audio
my
from.
sweatpants right now.
Bam. See? And like I post every single day. So I
Yeah,
record maybe 9 or 10 of these a day or something. And I'm up at midnight. I'm doing my workout or something. And then like I'm an insomniac. So I only get like 3 hours of sleep. But it's like you got to use it to your benefit. You got to be productive. And I started
yeah.
talking to so many people and realizing like a lot of their time is just being wasted watching Netflix and they wanted to hang out with their friends, but they were too lazy to leave the house. But they started up a podcast. Next thing you know, they feel reliable to this audience to get their content out there, whether it's one listener or two listeners, and it got them to keep getting together and doing this stuff to form this thing.
I know. Yeah. And all of that is absolutely true with the podcast that I'm working on. If I wasn't doing Cartwright with my buddy, he's in Cartwright is the Seinfeld podcast. He's in Atlanta. So, I mean, I probably would never barely talk to him, and then my buddy Zach, we would talk, but we wouldn't be as close as we are now or anything. So yeah, I love it, man. I do love it. The only thing I'd say I don't love about podcasting is the editing that comes with it. Yeah, I mean, it's necessary. It is necessary. And once we get off this right here, I mean, dude, I am pretty much going to be spending the rest of my day editing our Color Out of Space episode. The raw file is 3 hours long, so it'll probably take me, I'm guessing, 7 hours to get through it. It's usually always double whatever the raw file is. So if it's an hour, it'll take about 2 hours or so. So that is literally the rest of my day. It sucks because I'm not going to be able to listen to like a podcast, and I hate listening to myself, so I'm gonna have to like listen
I'm the
to
same way. I love it when people are like, I hate hearing myself. It's so weird. I'm like, you don't think I feel the same way when I'm editing and I keep hearing
But you have to. But you have to do it
Interesting. It's
because
like,
you've listened to podcasts that have not been edited, and man, it's pretty bad. You know,
mine are
it's
not edited most of the time, only because I like the real conversation. I love
yeah,
it. Like you hear like a kid in the background, like daddy's like, hold on, I'm podcasting, buddy. Like I leave that in there. And
yeah,
just because it shows it's real moments. It shows you're taking a minute of your day to be able to have a conversation. We all have the time to have basically we all have time to have a conversation, but we don't do so.
yeah,
But only time I ever edit is if like there's a few episodes people have severe social anxiety where there'll be giant pauses and then I can't really get an answer. I'll get like a yes or a or a
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. You didn't definitely didn't have a problem with me on that one.
yeah. I'll edit that out though, so it flows smoothly,
Yeah.
so it doesn't sound like you're stuttering. It doesn't sound like anything. You don't have anything wrong, so it makes you look good. I tell
Yeah.
people like I message people and I'll get the fucking why me, why not? Let's just have a conversation. I'll get people that'll be like, I'll give you 20 minutes. My show's an hour at least. Not happening. Sorry. Oh, I don't want to be on your fucking shit anyway. It's like okay. Next person is like, why? What do you want from me? You trying to attack me on something? What are you about? I'm like, I'm not here to attack you. Let's have
Yeah.
a conversation. I'm not going to make you look bad. I would never try and invite you onto something and make you look like a piece of shit. I just want to talk and learn some information because
And when I listened to the episodes that I did listen to, you absolutely did a great job of because I think the people who you talked to had never even done a podcast before, never even been on air, and you made them sound great. So I was like, I was like, cool. What that, right away, I was like, okay, I do not feel, I'm not worried about going on this at all. And I do the same thing. I tell people, I'm like, look, I'll keep in mistakes if it's funny. I'll keep in mistakes if it like leads to some sort of like insight into our personality. But if it makes us look bad, I'll cut it. I'm like, my thing is I'll never let you look bad,
I
when
got a
I'm
fucking
editing.
poop story on my podcast somewhere. I went to a Baltimore Ravens game and I did the most savage thing a 14-year-old could, or no, it was either like I was like 9, I think. I took a shit in between two parked cars in a parking garage. And I remember my dad freaked out, like this is so embarrassing. And my grandpa had toilet paper. And like my dad was
You
freaking out at
animal.
my dad was freaking out at my grandpa. My grandpa was just like, and I brought it up to him later at the I went I think like 6 or 7 months ago. I had dinner with my grandparents and I was like, "Do you remember that time?" And he goes, "When you shit between two parked cars at a Ravens game?" And I was like, "Yeah, dude, isn't that nuts?" He's like, "I don't know why your dad was so mad. I was just like happy I had toilet paper in the car. I never really used that for anything." I was like, "Right?" But like we talk about like what you learn from your family and like podcasting too. My conversations with podcasters or someone that owns their own podcast is like the same thing when you study film and you start to watch a film, you start to notice what goes into more. As a podcaster, you know what's good for sound quality, you know what's good to fill up a moment, you know what's good to do this. And that's why like a lot of people you see that are on my show that aren't podcasters, they don't know what the fuck to do. So a lot
Yeah.
of it's just questions, which I'm fine with. But also I try and make sure that for me as a host, I want to make sure you're comfortable and there's not that awkward like like short where it's engaging conversation. I want you to make you feel like I'm also being open to you as well. So the guards come down after like 5 or 10 minutes or something, and then the next thing you know, we're shooting off talking about whatever.
Yeah, and I think what sold me was the fact that I could tell that you were paying attention because you would ask questions that, were pertinent to, it wasn't like a pre-written question. It was pertinent to what the person had just said. So I was like, okay, he knows what he's doing. This is I felt safe. And I think at the end of the day,
I want to hug
that
you.
yeah, no, right? So we're 3,000 miles apart. Dude, I felt safe and I was like, cool, I'm totally cool with this. So, dude, I love it, man. I think it's freaking awesome. And I think what you're doing is awesome. And I think there's a market for it. I think it's really cool to hear all these different people's, points of view and all these different background stories. And man, I'm the type of guy that I like learning inside baseball about industries that I don't know anything about. I just find it fascinating learning like behind the scenes stuff. So like even with the lady talking about baking and stuff, it's just like little insights into her thing, and inside baseball into her life. And I'm like, oh, this is really fascinating to me. This is really interesting. So I like that. I
Yep.
like the personalities.
The same thing you offered up when you talk about like why you're doing podcasting, why you're doing this, why you're interested in movies and all this type of stuff. It's that and it's someone's inspiration to be like, oh, that's how that person thought that way. way. That's how that person got to do that. That's how that person really enjoys that. I mean, podcasting after dark, your logo is fucking awesome. I don't. That's Pink Floyd, I'm guessing, right? It's just like flipped around.
Like that 80s
It's
style,
sick. It's badass.
yeah.
Like people always ask, like, you talk about script or something, and people ask me, like, what's the script? What's the questions? What's this? I'm like, the name says it all. It comes
Yeah.
off like a bit like a dick, but I'm telling you, I can't put it in any other words because I don't know how to explain what this is. It is conversation, but it does go a little bit out of the blank, I would say, not to plug my own fucking show.
Hey man, plug your show, buddy. I am now officially a fan of it.
Look, man, I mean, I'm so happy you took the time out to do the podcast, dude. I really appreciate it. I mean, I know you got to get editing on this podcast too, but I mean, it was amazing being able to talk to you. I really want to give you here a minute at the end to plug all of your podcasts, even the fucking Seinfeld.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Like you said, podcasting after dark, that's like this cult one, cult movies and stuff like that, horror, etc. Cartwright, a Seinfeld podcast, is that one. And by the way, the reason we call it Cartwright is from the Chinese restaurant episode, from like season 2 or 3, I believe. And it's James Hong. It's the guy who is in Balls of Fury. He's the maitre d at the restaurant,
I'll have
and
to
he
look up that
calls
episode.
yeah, and he calls Costanza Cartwright, because that's the joke. He's like Cartwright, yeah, like that. But it's James Hong. It's from Big Trouble in Little China and whatnot. It's him. So that's what's great. It's a nice little connection to Balls of Fury. And then I do have a weekly comic book podcast called Ongoing Comic Book Discussion Podcast, and all of those podcasts plus a few other ones, Talking Back, Friday 5, and Blast from Our Past, were all on one big retro podcast network, and that is called it's called bfopnetwork.com. It stands for Blast from Our Past Network. But you can find every single podcast in the network at that website at www.bfopnetwork.com. That's bfopnetwork.com. And you can just find links to everything from there. You can, the Podbean link, the Stitcher link, all of the stuff.
I'll make sure I throw it in the description too so people can find it.
Cool.
With the comic book one, do you guys do like an audiobook type voice acting thing too?
No, it's we just basically take a trade every week and just we read it, and then we kind of do like a free form review of that trade. The catch to that podcast is that my co-host, my partner, Tess, she's only been reading comics for about a year now, whereas I've been reading comics my entire life. So the conversation is kind of comes at it from two different angles. And, and we try to make it so that it's a safe space so that you can ask the questions that you're kind of too scared to ask at the comic book store because you're afraid of being made fun of or something. So we kind of try to bring it from two different points of view,
I talk to people that do Dungeons and Dragons like podcasts and stuff, and they always act like I'm gonna attack them. And I'm like, I'm so fucking interested in LARPing. If I could, I would. Like, I like the foam swords. I like being able to
Yeah.
act out. I love the live action role play. But there's a good episode of my podcast. I really, not to plug myself here, but I want to point you towards because I know you'll definitely love it. There's a guy, Mark Felipe, I think his name is. Oh my god, he's gonna kill me if I get his name wrong. He's on Instagram, but he's a voice actor, like kind of, and he does Wolverine perfectly. So we
Oh,
did a
nice.
scene because I do impressions as well. I'm really into voice acting. We did the only time you'll ever hear Christopher Walken and Wolverine at a bar. And it was so because I would like walk up and be like, hello, you don't know too many words. You're drinking a beer. I don't know why. And then he would just come in with like Wolverine. It was priceless, dude. And we would sell like I sold you Tampax, or he sold you Tampax as Wolverine. I sold you like a hamster wheel as Christopher Walken. I would do impressions Jerry Seinfeld or some other thing. But it was just fun because that's what's enjoyable is like having people on like that.
Yeah, dude, I love it, man. That's so cool. Please send me that link. I'm definitely gonna listen to that.
I gotta make
one.
sure his name is his name on Instagram is Mad Mark VA. He's known as that Wolverine guy. It's Mark Felipa on gmail.com for all voice inquiries. I'll give him a plug. I give
Okay.
everybody a plug. I don't plug myself.
Nice. Yeah, my buddy Zach, for the podcast After Dark, he's a VO artist as well. So he's got like the whole setup in his house and everything, and that's like why he'll record in his little booth, and then I'll be in like my office here with my little sound guard and everything. But it's awesome, man. It's a lot of fun, and I'm glad to meet like another podcaster who's just as passionate about all this as we are, dude. I love making these network connections and whatnot. I just love people that are passionate about podcasting, man. I love podcasting.
It's just love. It's just really just being, I guess, beneficial to each other by being just nice to each other, having a conversation and meeting a friend. First of all, I'll call you a friend, dude. I
Yeah,
mean, it
buddy.
was great talking to you, but like at the same time, but you noticed it too, podcasting. It's become a bit of a competition aspect of things when it comes to trying to get views and stuff. People going and shitting on other podcasts. There's a podcast out there that takes Joe Rogan's podcast, Bert Kreischer's podcast, every single famous person's podcast, the podcast Last on the Left, whatever that one's called, I've never listened to, but it's a podcast that shits on other podcasts as their episode. So one episode for like the last podcast on the left was like the podcast on the right that ignores the left. And it's like, what? And you're listening to it and they're just talking shitting on everything about it. It's like there are people out there that just want to watch the world burn. Holy shit.
Yeah, no, I know. I don't, I don't keep any comments on my page that are negative. I'll delete that. I don't, man, especially right now, ain't nobody got time for negativity. Like we got to just be happy for each other and we got to connect and we just got to support each other with whatever we're doing because I mean, at the end of the day, every single one of us is just shouting into the void hoping that hoping that it resonates with somebody else, you know what I mean? And we just got to help each other, just be supportive of one another. I know that everyone's saying that and whatnot, but it's true. There's a lot of negativity out there, so just let's not be a part of it. Let's just be
I'm
positive.
sure you got your haters. I got my haters
Yeah,
too. I
haters
got
gonna hate, man.
Yeah, I mean, you just gotta kind of like let it go. I mean, even the one hater that I have that constantly like he's just upset he didn't want to use his real name. So I was like, "That's how my show goes. Sorry, bro." And then he was like, "Oh, he's gonna rate me because he wants to know my real name." I'm like, "I'm fucking giving you my real name too. I give you my address. You know how many times I've shot off my address to give somebody a bottle of hot sauce, or someone sending me a bottle of hot sauce? Like, holy crap!"
I know one of our fans sent me a movie, and my wife was like, "So you gave him our address?" And I was
I
like,
give that shit out so
"I know." I
easy
was like,
now.
"Yeah, I guess I did." She's like,
Send nudes.
"Hmm."
I want a photo. I want one of those like the ones you have to like flick in the air a bunch of times to cool it down or something. I want one
Yeah,
of those old school nudes in that way. That's how you used to send them back in the day.
yeah, the Polaroids, man. I know.
And I hope that shit didn't get lost.
Exactly, in the mail. Made somebody a really happy mailman.
Or male woman. You don't
There
know.
you hey, there you go. Good call, buddy. Equal opportunity.
Well, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Out of the Blank podcast and stay tuned for our next episode.